Space, the final frontier.
A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
These are the voyages of the USS Enterprise.
War.
It's
the rebellion in the Empire.
Space, the final frontier.
A small band of rebels striking.
It's 5-year mission.
Guys, it's fine. We're going to debate Star Wars versus Star Trek because your geek history lesson is now in session.
Hello and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I am Jason, the Final Frontier Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson. Welcome to your Mind University because you have stumbled onto the podcast where we take one character, construct, or starship from popular culture and teach you everything you need to know about them in about an hour. Except today. We're doing a new thing today that we've never done before. It's going to be great.
Well, it's funny. There's a story behind today's episode. So we have a great guest on this podcast. He is a nerd expert. He is an expert in his field. He's also a very funny gentleman, very smart gentleman. And every time I've seen him for about 6 months now, I've told him about the idea for this episode. And I thought that it would make a fun discussion episode. And it just now happened that we were finally able to make our schedules work to make this episode. The guest I am talking about is Ken Napzok, and the subject of today is Star Trek versus Star Wars. First off, Ken, welcome to the podcast.
I'm so happy that much like most people in Los Angeles, we get together over podcasts.
That's right.
You both are just killing it right now with all the creative projects you're doing. I'm happy to be part of this show, which I remember when I first heard the idea or the pitch or like the show, you see it listed. And you're like, oh, that's their Ashley Jason show. I was like, that's perfect.
Yeah.
You could almost stop Geek Podcasting. You guys have got something great.
Yeah, take that, Kevin Smith.
Yes. But happy to be there.
If only he would stop, we would have more broadband. All right.
That's true.
All right. So, Ken, you are what I would consider to be a Star Wars expert. You are, if we want to consider these you bona fides, you were the Star Wars movie champion for the Schmodown.
Right.
You are currently writing a some sort of project thing about this Star Wars. I can't confirm anything or deny it because of
Star Wars
legal contracts. But I want to know. Where did you first get into Star Wars? Why do you love Star Wars? Why are you a Star Wars expert?
I'll tell you, I'll start why I'm a Star Wars expert. I'm just so old that I've hung around and I've just seen things enough to know. And I have a decent memory. I am definitely that generation. I was 1 year old in my mom and dad's Volkswagen van at the drive-in theater seeing A New Hope. I have no memory of it, obviously. Drive-in theater.
Wow.
Yes, with the old speakers hanging on the box there. So obviously I have no memory of that, but I always joke that, hey, just kind of floated.
You made an impression.
Yeah. And my mom and dad aren't Star Wars. My dad loves big pictures, and I always joke at the end of Force Awakens, he sent me a text. He's like, I think they're leaving it open to more movies. So
that's so sweet.
Do you think they'll make a Star Wars sequel? I'm not certain, Kenny.
Maybe, Dad. But it's just filtered in, and the first moment I remember the trailer for Return of the Jedi at a friend's slumber party, and there was just something about it. Until then, Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica and Star Trek, I kind of thought they were all the same thing, and probably Buck Rogers on TV as well. They all kind of fell into one, but it was Return of the Jedi, and then even I had some Marvel comics, the original Star Wars line, and those ones immediately jump off out of the story, and they're not canon, they're kind of crazy, and so I was always kind of confused, like, well, when's this in the movie? Like, I don't know. And it just kind of pulled me into the universe.
Ashley, we know you are a Star Trek expert.
Yes.
You are the
internet has said so.
Co-producer, co-writer of a Star Trek web series that people to this day ask us if we're ever going to bring back.
Yeah.
4 years after it ended?
Okay.
4 years
at
after
the time of
we ended it 4 years ago.
Yes. At the time of this podcast, I recently shared a throwback photo of me and Hal Rudnick doing an episode, and people said, oh, great, Red Shirt Diaries is coming back. And I was like, no, I did not mean to imply that. I'm sorry. Connor Schneer tweeted at me once.
Yeah.
There you go. Those are my bona fides.
Where did you first come into Star Trek? Why do you love Star Trek? Why would you consider yourself a Star Trek expert?
When I was 12 years old, I used to come home after school and watch Spike, the network for men, because they would play...
the forgotten great network of Spike.
Oh, what a garbage network. It's also where I first discovered CSI. You'll never hear that geek history lesson. Where I would come home after school and they would play one episode of TOS, one episode of TNG, one episode of DS9, Voyager, and then Enterprise. And the first episode of Star Trek I ever saw was Arena, which is, Kirk goes down to the lizard planet, fights the guy with the seam on the suit. And I was like, this is great.
Fights the lizard.
I'm
Dun, 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 dun,
that's, no. That's
also
a mock
play it
time.
there. They also play it
but
there.
It's from a mock time.
Sure.
Hey, she's the expert.
That's right.
She's the expert.
I'm sorry.
And that's
a long time ago at a galaxy. Okay.
That's where I first encountered it. And then I fell in love with William Riker and Julian Bashir. And I was like, I'm just never leaving. How about you, Jason?
I've said the story, I think, several times in this podcast, but I remember when Encounter at Farpoint, the first episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, was going to air in 1987, September some date. It was a Saturday on a 6:30, and they were talking about it on the news for the week leading up to it. The news was making a big deal about Star Trek was coming back. My parents are absolutely not about sci-fi. They don't like sci-fi. They don't watch sci-fi, but they were going to watch the first episode because everybody was talking about it. And I watched that episode, and it hooked me. And from there out, I watched every episode of Star Trek in that little series, anyways, live to date. Like I was there every Saturday night at 6:30, and I loved it. And Star Trek's like the reason why I wanted to be an astronaut until I found out that you had to know a lot of math, and I'm terrible at math.
Like so much math.
Star Trek's the whole reason why I want to go to space. I want to go to space. Like, and Star Trek's the whole reason. I would credit Star Trek more so than comic books for the reason why I want to write and be a creative and do that stuff like that is because, again, like them meeting weird aliens with weird horns and ears and stuff like that. I was like, oh, I was a stupid farm kid from Kansas, and I was like, oh my God, there are people with blue skin out there. Wow.
I hope there are.
I
surely hope there are.
You were almost a real life Kirk, a few states away.
That's right. I am. I've always wanted to go to Riverside, Iowa. I've heard the plaque for his birthplace is underneath a pool table. Because the idea is that supposedly he was conceived in this bar underneath the pool table.
Gross.
It's pretty gross. It's pretty gross. But there's just like a plaque in Riverside, Iowa. Go enjoy it. And that could be, my friend could have been funny me when he told me that. I don't know.
Hello, Geek History Lesson students. Tex Williman, your old friend here to talk about a company that I love and that I have a 30% ownership in. So I want to talk about them. I'm talking about Lisa. They are a mattress that is redesigned, and they are super comfy because over the last 30 years, I've owned many companies. I've owned circuses, I've owned Piggly Wigglies, and now I own Lisa Mattress because they are a product of more than 30 years of experience in mattress engineering and hundreds of hours of testing. Now, some of those hours of testing personally been myself. Sometimes I like to lay down in their cooling, pressure relief, body contouring, and support features while I take off my cowboy hat and I relax on the back porch on a Lisa mattress in my hacienda, or my ranch, as I like to say. So if you don't know, I like to give a little discount to my friends over here at the Geek History Lesson podcast, or radio show, as you'd like to call it. And you can order your Lisa mattress online at lisa.com/geekhistory. That's LEESA.com/geekhistory. And when you check out, use the promo code GeekHistory. And you can try this risk-free for 100 nights. There's not many things in this world you can try risk-free for 100 nights. Sadly, there's no company out there that will let you try an elephant risk-free for 100 nights. There is no company that will let you try a four-wheeler risk-free for 100 nights. But Lisa will let you try out their mattresses risk-free for 100 nights. Get up to $160 off the Lisa mattress, or $235 off the Luxury Superior mattress, and free shipping on a Lisa mattress at lisa.com/geekhistory. Enter promo code GeekHistory at checkout. That's LEESA.com/geekhistory. And back to the regular show, my friends. It's been Tex Williman. Yeehaw!
So the idea about this is that we're not going to do a movie fights. If you know that show over on ScreenDuckies.com, Ken has produced that show. I have produced that show. Yeah. We're not doing a movie fights because I think yelling at everybody is stupid.
We're just having a discussion.
We're going to have a discussion. We have certain points. I've told Ken about these certain points ahead of time, and we're just going to have a debate. Nobody's right. Nobody's wrong. The whole idea about this is that we walk away from this podcast with a better appreciation for each other's franchise. That's kind of the idea. And if you're out there listening to this, you love Star Wars, and you're just like, Star Trek is stupid, I hope you walk away from this podcast being, maybe I'll go watch an episode. And I hope if you hate Star Wars, you'll do the same. Like, that's the whole idea about this podcast. Because I find that when you get in deep conversations with people that love these things, you're like, oh, maybe I will check that out. Maybe I will. I'd never thought about that way. That's what I'm looking for in this one. Not yelling.
Also, if you've never seen Star Wars... Where
you been?
It's pretty difficult to find someone who has it.
Check your pulse.
But they do exist. No, I love it. This is great. I actually, growing up in the 80s, I guess it was an innocent time. I used to fight. Not physically, but like I had a friend of mine named Steve Morris, if you're listening, junior high and high school together. He was a big Star Trek fan, and we used to get into these little, which one's bad? It's like, that's silly.
Although I will put down these bona fides. Episode either 7 or 8 of movie fights in the original season. Right. I fought for Star Trek versus Star Wars, and I won.
Well, I remember seeing that. And, we're all friends with the great Scott Mantz. Star Trek is life, just like with both of you. And I love Scott. So why would we not want to?
Well, it's also the same thing. And it would be interesting to see. I would love. This is a dream podcast idea. I would love Christian Harloff of Collider and the Schmoes Know for Star Wars versus Scott Mantz for Star Trek, and see if either one of them can convince the other one by the end of the podcast.
Scream at each other.
I think they will.
A lot of volume. A lot of volume. There's a lot of Star Wars fans that want to fight Christian over his views of Star Wars.
Get over that. All right, so let's do this, Ken. Let's start off with our topics. So I want you to talk about who you think, and it doesn't have to be the end-all, be-all, but who do you think is a great character, that is representative of Star Wars, and why they are great?
There would have been a time that, Han Solo is my favorite character, right? So I grew up loving Han. But when you talk about like the greatest or the best and who I want to represent Star Wars, it's Leia Organa. Princess or general doesn't matter.
Oh, great choice.
What is started with that character, what George was trying to accomplish, I think, is also a little bit of his time, but, he cast Carrie Fisher for a reason, and what has grown and what is one of the victories of new canon or the continuation of the stories is to see where this character's gone. And I love Han, and I love how he fights with himself over, am I a good guy, I'm a smuggler? He fights for that to the very bitter end. It's in his soul. It's kind of the emotional canon is something we talk over on Force Center with Joseph and Jennifer. Like, the emotional canon of the new stories ties really well with a lot of things. So Han's got that going on. And Luke, he is the good guy of good guys in the 80s, right? He's stuck, and he throws down his blade at the end, and he's not even going to fight. He's going to win through love of his father and all those kind of. I think that's very representative of Star Wars. But Leia went from, I think, an oversight in George's writing, which was her planet blows up, and she's like, "Are you okay, Luke? You lost your friend. Are you okay?" That there's a little bit of an oversight in George. I think that would have been dealt with differently. From that blossoms this wonderful strength of a leader, this wonderful strength of someone who now at the end, going into episode 9, and fortunately we lost Carrie, but the character will always exist. That's the legacy of Leia, the Legion of Leia, as Jenna Bush started her organization. Leia is there still fighting. She is sacrificed. She is lost. And that's part of the power of 8 to me is her like kind of like, enough. I can't keep losing people, but we still have to fight. We still have to make these tough decisions. And she's been here the whole time. And then in some of the new books, Bloodline by Claudia Gray, it's a political book. And she's revealed to be the daughter.
Read that. Have you read that, Ashley?
I read the Princess Leia book by Claudia
Leia, Princess of Alderaan,
which is
great.
Very good. Also, I like it because you get a little more look at her latent Force abilities, which is something that I don't need Leia to become a Jedi. I don't even need her to carry a lightsaber, but I like the nod to that because it's more than, and that's part of the technology that they had in movie making at the time. It's more than we ever got in the original trilogy.
I will say, as a person who read a lot of the Legends books, as they're called now, or the Expanded Universe books, I actually liked when Leia had a purple lightsaber. I liked it. I did.
That's fine.
And I love, Leia and the Claudia Gray verse. She's written these 3 great Star Wars books, and the Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon one is coming. It so beautifully connects, and in the Bloodline one, it touches on the fact that you learn she was Luke's first student, and she kind of sacrificed, not that the pursuit of being a Jedi was about glory or Luke was about glory, but she sacrificed that part. She's like, no, the galaxy, this is what I need to do.
Do we think JJ missed anything by not making her Darth Leia? Just throwing it out there.
Potentially.
No.
Yeah.
Potentially. And that's part of that's what I love, going back to Leia, 16-year-old Leia, not knowing, why did I just kind of leap and save somebody?
Yeah, from the rock face.
Beautiful. It's beautiful stuff. So I think as the story has unfolded and now going into 9 movies, and even, Rogue One, she shows up and, she represents hope, and hope's always was, but now it's become this big thing in Star Wars. And Leia's, I think, a lot of hope even through dark times. So I put her forth as the best of Star Wars.
That's a great choice.
That is a great choice.
Ashley, who's your choice for Star Trek?
This is interesting because when you have a franchise that you love, kind of like Ken alluded to, you're spoiled for choice. You feel like you can make a pretty good case for a lot of characters. I think we're going with one of the more obvious choices, and that has to be Spock. He's arguably the most iconic character in the franchise. I would say that he outstrips Captain Kirk. Captain Kirk fans probably have a different feeling about that. I'm sorry, Mr. Shatner. I know we're country people, but I just can't let you win this. Spock is the consummate outsider, and that's the reason that Spock has lasted, because when a lot of us come to Star Trek as children or as young adults, we feel othered, whether it's because we're nerds, we're women, we're people of color, we're queer, whatever. And that's why Spock resonates with so many people in our community. He's somebody who has to literally choose between himself. He's split. His parents are split. He's a child of two worlds. And that's a very dynamic, interesting choice that you can only do in science fiction. And I think it stands out compared to a character like Kirk, who is a more classic Clark Kent, American hero, cowboy archetype. And then Leonard Nimoy brings such a depth to Spock that I think has affected all of the Vulcans that came past him, with the live long and prosper salute, sort of the latent Judaism, and which evolved into this weird spirituality from the Vulcans. Like, Spock, culturally and within the canon, touched so much that I don't know if you can look at any other character and see the same type of legacy in the franchise and in the fandom.
I would agree with that. And just to give a bonus point to Spock here, no character death in Star Wars gets me like Spock's death in Wrath of Khan. Wrath of Khan's Spock death makes me cry every time. And I mean, well, I guess there's not many big character deaths in Star Wars when you think about it.
So I'd like you to watch Red 6 Porkin's death again. I'd like you to really reconsider your
I mean, when the
answer.
Rancor goes down, it's kind of sad, especially when the fat guard cries. I feel his pain.
I think the closest that you get in Star Wars is probably the death of Vader, of Anakin.
I would agree with that.
Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'd
the
agree
power
with
of
that.
redemption at the end. Yeah,
Yeah.
it pulls those strings. Yeah.
I would, and again, and this is the attention listeners of this podcast, but I'm also going to throw out another Star Trek character, and maybe I'll throw out a Star Wars character to balance a little bit. But it doesn't matter.
I don't have a
I know. We don't have a tag team. It's just the way we design this
cat
podcast.
doesn't like me,
whatever.
Yeah.
I want to throw out a vote for Captain Picard. Captain Jean-Luc Picard, played by Patrick Stewart, as a very strong character. And the reason why, very briefly, I want to talk about his character is that he is a hero very much unlike a lot of main characters in basically any franchise, not even Star Wars. He is very much a pacifist. And he's very much of like, let's talk through this, let's figure it out. He's always for the diplomatic reason. But another thing that makes him extremely unique is that he is a character that is basically, and this is surprising for a male character, he is a metaphor for rape. He is absorbed by the Borg collective, and he is turned into Locutus of Borg. He loses his identity, he loses everything about him, he loses his emotions, and then he is unassimilated. I don't know why I said absorbed earlier. He's unassimilated from the Borg, and he becomes Jean-Luc Picard. And one of the best episodes of Star Trek ever is this episode called Family, where he has to deal with his PTSD. And then we even get to see that later in the Star Trek movie First Contact, where he's still dealing with his issues from before. And I want to say that's a very powerful metaphor to me, especially for a male character to have to deal with that.
I think it's fascinating that you brought up Picard in those terms, because I happen to know that your favorite Star Wars character is Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yes.
Also a character who really preaches pacifism and
talking through your problems,
being calm and centering yourself through spiritualism, and ultimately gives himself over to death to serve the greater good.
Yeah.
So you kind of picked two space wizards that you like in these franchises.
There you go. Well, I think for Star Wars, I will, I could make the argument for Obi-Wan Kenobi. He is, for fair point, he is my favorite Star Wars character, and that's why I'm screaming to the heavens that why aren't we getting that movie, Ewan McGregor?
You should see Ken's face right now.
But I want to give some props to a character that I think a lot of people in Star Wars ignore that I think is really great. R2-D2.
Oh,
R2-D2.
baby!
That little jerk.
Yeah.
He is a jerk.
Yes. But without him, the entirety of the franchise does not happen. If R2-D2 in that desert, seriously, if R2-D2 in that desert listened to 3PO at any point, he would have never found Luke.
Interesting.
There's two great points in A New Hope that, we can all win any movie you can play the if that doesn't happen, this doesn't happen game. But there's two big ones where R2, I would totally agree. He is so stubborn. He's going to do what he wants to do. And also the Imperial officer who's like, don't fire at that one.
Oh, yeah.
Escape pod. Shoot at that, the whole thing's over.
Let's call him Steve.
3PO's great. There is, in the Poe Dameron Marvel comic line, which was wrapped up now, issue 28, there's a conversation that happens between two war veterans, and you're just seeing the conversation. And you're like, wow, this is pretty fascinating stuff. What is this? And they're talking about the Battle of Yavin. They're talking about the Battle Starkiller Base, and the people lost. And then they start going through the astromechs lost. And you're like, oh, this is great. Nerd information.
Yes.
And it cuts to the frame. You don't know who's talking. It's BB-8 and R2-D2. And R2-D2 is a war veteran talking about the losses at Battle of Yavin. It's really one of the best Star Wars moments.
You also have to think about there's something, and it's kind of lost in the newer Star Wars movies, but in the original trilogy, and they lose this in the prequels as well, you notice that there are certain points where R2-D2 is not welcome. In the bar, Jabba doesn't like droids. Jabba tortures droids. Jabba has a droid that specifically tortures droids. So like the droids are looked at as second-class citizens.
They're almost like a servant class or a slave class.
Yeah, and R2-D2 at every point in almost all the movies, even the prequels, proves himself to not be a second-class citizen.
Hashtag justice for R2.
Yeah.
And as we learned in Revenge of the Sith, first, and it's been played upon there, did not have his memory wiped, so he goes through all the movies, including knowing everything.
He knows
he keeps
everything.
Secrets. He keeps secrets.
He's a little tricksy bastard. All right.
He's got to be good too if Leia chooses him, because we do see R2. He's also kind of framed as like a silly, not a screw up, but like he's very silly, and a lot of people don't take him seriously.
You don't think there was a moment of fate, a pure fate, that R2 was just the closest?
I don't know. I don't know, but I like the idea that Leia chose him for a reason.
Cool.
Maybe because he's feisty.
They're probably both wearing white, so she's like, oh, you like me?
That's shallow of you.
That's awesome. I love both your guys' choice for Star Trek, because someone who's a fan of Star Trek enough, but is far back enough, I would say Spock specifically reminds me of everything about Star Trek, right? The logical stuff in Star Trek, not that it doesn't have adventure. We're going to talk about that.
And no one's not welcome. It's supposed to be this very open, diplomatic idea.
Because he's the first Vulcan in Starfleet.
Well, look exactly what Roddenberry did and the makers of that show. We remember it as this fun, campy, Kirk's fighting guys in weird lizard costumes.
And it's very that.
But it is that. But look at the tumultuous 60s, what Roddenberry was saying and doing, and a lot of that, Spock emerges from that as kind of the poster person for that. And I think it's a good choice. And Picard, kind of the same, the anti-Kirk in a lot of
he's very unique in that factor because he's not the cowboy, and I think he's another counterpoint that he's a very strong. I mean, you have to think about there has to be a reason why everybody went nuts when they announced that they were going to bring back the Captain Picard series.
We also, on the Star Trek side, picked two very incredibly intellectual characters.
Yes, which is I think that is the strength of Star Trek,
and also Leia, a diplomat. And a very highly educated character.
R2-D2, also a diplomat.
We picked
we saw him serving drinks.
I guess I should have gone. My second choice was Jabba, and I think that would have been.
If you could make a case for the Hutt family, I would be impressed.
I could make a case for Salacious Crumb. I can tell you that.
Oh no,
absolutely, Sally B, man,
puppet of all
the
time.
Joe Piscopo of the Star Wars galaxy. All right, so Ken, let's go to the next part of here. So I want you to say one thing that you think Star Wars does better. Now, this could be a character, story, plot, theme. What do you think one thing that Star Wars does better than Star Trek?
Whew, okay, yeah. I was going to make a sassy comment and say momentum. Our stories are just faster and more intense, like George. It might be.
Well, until the J.J. Abrams movie, that was true.
Well, and was that 2009, right?
Yeah, 2009.
I was in the theater going, I want Star Wars to look like this.
Yep.
Interesting.
I mean, we all know that was his demo
It was
reel for
his
Star
audition
Wars.
piece, for sure, yeah.
Especially when R2 showed up in it.
Yep.
There.
Yeah.
Star Wars may do this, and this might be the first debate point, may create better lore, and then you can draw upon the lore. It comes to me more as fantasy versus sci-fi, and not that Star Trek, but Star Trek, because it's earthbound in a way, has we're the lore almost.
Yeah.
Or Earl Grey tea becomes important at
Yes.
Picard, where George created this world, faults and all, and we can still draw upon it, and a lot of the big lessons come from that, and so it maybe feels slightly different, or you're more detached from the real world when you're in Star Wars.
Let me ask you a crazy question, because you talked about the Earthbound.
Yeah.
In your head, is Earth anywhere in Star Wars? Is Star Wars in the future of Earth, the past of
No,
Earth?
it's a long time ago.
Or just forget about Earth altogether?
I think it could be the Battlestar Galactica ending coming up.
Okay, cool.
No, I don't think it'll ever.
R2-D2 founds Manhattan.
He's just there alone.
He's just there walking around, runs into Caprica 6, and they're just
Yeah, Leah Dama's like, hey.
I in my head, this is my personal headcanon, I think Earth doesn't factor into it at all.
yeah.
It is fun, though. I love the E.T. connection. And I love that E.T. or the
his aliens
of
are in the
they're in the prequels, and then to see E.T. react to Yoda in the movie E.T. is a really fun kind of like, well,
sort of,
Spielberg putting all the Club Obi-Wan and all the stuff kind of in the movies. But in my mind, it's not Earthbound at all.
Yeah, I just curious. I didn't mean to like completely detour your point.
I thought it was point one. I thought it was round 2 of the fight.
No, we're not doing that
Ding,
at all.
ding, ding.
So you think Star Wars creates better lore?
I think because it is more fantasy than sci-fi to me. So it is more Flash Gordon, obviously, with George's connections. A little more Lord of the Rings. A little more, even Game of Thrones now. I think George R. R. Martin, down to the food everyone loves, is he's going to type all that stuff out, and so I think Star Wars is more in that vein. Where in Star Trek you go into it for a little different reasons, maybe on the surface.
I would definitely concede that. I think the mythology, even if you're just looking at Jedi and Sith, it does wear its influences on its sleeve, but it is creative, it is interesting, and it is epic in a way that Star Trek is not epic on that same level.
No.
Yeah.
I don't mean that to say Star Trek is not epic.
Oh, no.
It totally is, but I know what you mean.
Yeah, space opera, space fantasy versus sci-fi.
Well, to me, it's kind of, and this is going to be a bad. It's like comparing Zeus, the story of Zeus, to the story of Ulysses S. Grant. Like they're both interesting.
Yes,
but one is more mythical than the other one, and Star Wars is definitely Zeus.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think there's my whole life is Star Wars, but I think Star Wars sometimes is it's a Chili's. And Star Trek is you want to head over to that small organic shop around the corner owned by a friend, and it's you spend more time there, and you get to know everything, and you get to
the
good
meals are slightly better. No,
but in a weird way.
but it's more expensive.
But it's more expensive.
Yes.
Star Wars is my life, but you can't. It is at times fast food sci-fi, and I acknowledge that.
Yeah.
I totally acknowledge that, and that's
and we will totally concede the point of that. Star Trek sometimes is so heady it hurts. Like it's too heady sometimes for the normal audience.
Yes, which is hilariously a criticism that was lobbed at the Star Wars prequels was that there was too much diplomacy.
Right.
And Star Trek definitely suffers from the trade agreements and embargoes, and that's a real part of it. And sometimes that turns out to be fascinating, like in Deep Space Nine, and sometimes you're like, I don't give a crap about Klingons anymore, guys.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And I, over the years, have become what we call Force Center prequelists, where we just love the characters, love the stories. I'm not going to lie and say I wasn't disappointed in 1999 when I saw a lot of the stuff, but I think a lot of what George was putting out there, especially with the politics, you look at, I love Star Wars, right? I love the sequel trilogies, except for I'm like, well, the state of the galaxy is not explained as much. I wish there was more politics in this, which is why Claudia Gray comes in with Bloodline, and you got Leia in a political election, know, and it's like interesting stuff.
I will argue, and I heard this very recently on another podcast, by the way. I heard somebody say that if you took the outline, just the outline, like it's like one sentence per scene of the Star Wars prequels, they work.
Sure.
It's the execution of those sentences that is where it fails.
George Lucas hates dialogue. It gets in the way of what he does. And he wants to make silent movies. He's an artist. He's a USC art student. A film student, but like an art art guy at heart. So if you watch a lot of it, I go to my least favorite Star Wars film, not counting the Clone Wars theatrical movie, is Attack of the Clones. There's a lot of things that just doesn't work. And it's one of the longest ones. The scene where Padme says, I truly, deeply love you. And then they have a wooden kiss. And then they are pulled out into the Petronaki arena to be killed. Take away the dialogue, you have this beautiful moment where this forbidden love
and
is
Across
finally...
the Stars is an amazing theme.
It's amazing. And Williams is great.
Well, I was also going to say, I was like, I don't know if the casting helped that either, which I think is why I'm really interested in the character of Padme, and I think she's been well executed in a lot of other places. There's a new... E.K. Johnson has a book coming out about her next year, which I'm very excited for. Yes. But I think that's also why, when we were talking about deaths earlier, we didn't bring up Padme's death, which really should be the most tragic.
It should be the crux of the prequels. Like, it should be the one that just... It should be Spock's death. Yeah. It really should be.
I think you're really right. Padme is an underrated character. If you go back to Phantom Menace, this 14-year-old queen that's willing to fight and die for her people.
And there's a lot of Leia in that, too.
A ton of Leia. And the Leia, Princess of Alderaan book, when she goes back to the moon of Naboo and Panaka sees her, it's one of my favorite moments because she's in the same dress that Padme wore. Fascinating stuff. But yeah, and there was, if you read the great book by Chris Taylor, How Star Wars Conquered the Universe, there might have been some stuff going on with Natalie Portman on the set, and it didn't work as...
It's hard to make movies, guys.
It's hard to make movies. It's hard to make movies. And we never know the true story, and there was just a little... You hear, but I don't know if whatever is fact. And so I think by the time Revenge of the Sith comes around, I don't know if she wanted to be there, and I don't know if they wanted her there, and I don't. And I think that's tragic because I think you're right. She dying... She dying? Is that a sentence?
She died.
She died.
She died. She died.
Padme passing away should be more than what it sometimes is, which is a
Yeah. But she's got some good musical themes, so at least there's that.
Padme's ruminations, where she's sitting there and they're beautiful.
Yeah, and looking, and Anakin is looking through the Jedi Temple window, and she's looking through her window. That's one of my favorite moments in the prequel trilogy.
There's good editing in that sequence.
Yes. Speaking of that, I'm going to flip you now. Now I'm going to ask you, Ken, you're the Star Wars expert, but what is one thing that Star Trek does better than Star Wars? You just said that Star Wars does lore better.
Yeah.
What does Star Trek do better?
I think Star Wars does a more... it directly challenges us as to what we think or what we want and what we're trying to accomplish. Where Star Wars does, in a lot of ways, George Lucas, pretty political in some of his stuff and what he was trying to say, but you can just go Ewoks, and he's like Vietnam War. So Star Trek from Roddenberry back in the day, while my favorite show of the 60s, Gilligan's Island, and the monkeys are on, he's like, cool, we're going to fight lizard people, but look at what we're trying to do. And I think to this day, Star Trek can be a little more direct because it is earthbound and say, here's a reflection of us and what's going on and what are you looking for. And then the example of Spock, great example. That's something a lot of people might miss, but it is at play more in the forefront, and also the science. I think Neil deGrasse Tyson probably likes Star Trek a little bit more.
Yeah, he does.
I think so.
100%.
I think that's the difference too. We made a Blue Aliens joke earlier. There's Blue Aliens in both franchises. Star Trek TOS has a character who is literally half white and half black, and that's an allegory for racism. Yeah. In Star Wars, if there was a character that was half white and half black, it's just a cool design.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine. Yep. Whichever one you prefer.
No, absolutely. And George had some, I think, infamous missteps in the prequels with some of his choices. So but Star Trek, that's been kind of the heart of it from the beginning. Yeah.
So did Shatner in The Final Frontier, Star Trek 5. Right. Some famous missteps.
He's climbing that mountain.
Yep, he is making love to the mountain. Ashley, what does Star Trek do better than Star Wars?
I am going to use a broad word that everyone's going to get up in arms about it, but just let me finish.
Right.
Character.
I'm going to stop you right there. No.
Character's great, but Star Wars has some of the best characters of all time. I don't mean that any of the characters in Star Wars are less impactful, less iconographic. That's not a word. Iconographic is the word I'm looking for. Or less meaningful. I just mean that I think Star Trek, due to the facts, like Ken's alluded to, it's earthbound. They're dealing with real-world issues and allegory more obviously than Star Wars. You get into the characters, you get into their flaws, you get into them, who they represent, and I think you get a more dynamic type of storytelling. What I mean by that is, like in Deep Space Nine, there's a character named Kira Nerys who's introduced as a terrorist, and by the end, she works alongside of Starfleet. She becomes deeply religious. She works with her enemies. She saves her planet.
Well, and we, you can look at that Deep Space Nine, and it's part of the reason why it's my favorite Star Trek show and your favorite Star Trek show as well, Ashley, is that you can look at Deep Space Nine. Kira's character arc is PTSD.
Yeah.
And it takes her 7 years to get over it. And when she does, in the last season, especially in her last scene, you almost feel like, oh, I'm finally meeting the real Kira Nerys for the first time.
With all of that stripped away from her. And that's also the difference between having hundreds of episodes of television and less than 10 movies at this point. I think in Star Wars, you're dealing more with broader archetypes. And part of that, too, is Star Wars is one of the things that solidified what we now understand to be the hero's journey, which is a very broad archetypical story type that wouldn't be as popular without Star Wars. And I think if you take away the books and the comic canon, you don't get that same level of development. And it's probably just a numbers game as well.
I think I agree with that, too. And I think a big part of that is because each show has 7 main characters.
Yeah.
And there's 7 shows
and
now.
20 plus episodes a season.
And 20 plus episodes a season. So, but even out of the gate, the characters seem deeper. And I think part of that is because they are trying to always make sure that there's a piece of every character that we can relate to. Every character, even the weird alien characters, they're like, oh, Quark, the Ferengi in Deep Space Nine, he's a weird businessman. Well, my dad is a used car salesman. He's Quark.
Yeah.
Oh, I get that. And in Star Wars, I agree that there's a little bit more of a barrier between us and the ultimate pure hero of Luke Skywalker.
And now with the movie, Star Wars is getting a little more complicated. We're getting more characters dealing with gray areas. But for a long time, the morality of that universe was black and white, which is what is appealing and easy to access about it.
100%. And that is, you just mentioned it, the journey of Luke Skywalker as it ends in episode 8. And this isn't a comment on whether you like the movie or not. This is just focused on Luke's story. I think Rian Johnson took what number one JJ did, which was Han Solo says in Force Awakens. He had this bad thing happen. He felt guilty. He ran away from his problems. Han Solo says that. Ryan gets it, does his story, and Luke comes back and connects to who he was in Return of the Jedi. The guy who threw down the lightsaber, refused to kill his own father.
Pacifist,
Pacifist and saved him out of his love. And that's this journey. And I think as some of Star Wars gets a little more, Claudia Gray, again, Lost Stars comes
I love Lost
her
Stars.
young adult book, right? We all, it's a young adult. Boom, this thing comes and it literally has this Romeo and Juliet thing going on, but also it ends up dealing with, I had friends on the Death Star that died. Those terrorists blew them up. But no, the Death Star did this. And it's the first time you had those direct questions asked. And now I think in the end of the day, we know who's the good team, who's the bad team, because there's some people in some dark capes and some red lightsabers. I think makes it easier.
I love a red lightsaber.
And it's kind of cool, right? The bad guys have the more cool toys, as they used to say. So I think you're right. So I find it really interesting that now some of the new stuff in Star Wars canon, because you're having more time with the books and the comics, and now it's quote unquote connected. Obviously, Legends was big and wide. It's funny to me that it's now people are having more of this. No, Luke, that's not my Luke. It probably was. You just went to the fast food sci-fi. Yeah. Where Star Trek, you got to take that time. You got to see.
Well, and again, it's also there's several characters, and we're gonna keep going back to Deep Space Nine because it is the grayest. That's your guys' favorite. That's our favorite Star Trek series. Okay. It also deals with the grayest of the gray.
Because they're on a station, they're not on a ship, so it's more character driven. It's often credited with being the first narrative television series.
So it's actually credited to be the first serialized television show. Yeah. Or the first serial the modern era.
Yes.
I gotcha. What year did it come out? I apologize.
93.
Yeah, okay. I was high school from
93. So another let's go to the year, even the original series. Kirk has an arc through the original Star Trek movies where he's basically a racist.
Yeah.
Klingons kill his son in Star Trek 3.
There is a racist character in every Star Wars, and they all every Star Trek. I'm sorry, they all have to over. Chief O'Brien in Deep Space Nine is
Chief
racist
O'Brien in
against
Deep Space Nine
Cardassians.
is racist against Cardassians.
There's actually a lot of racism in Deep Space Nine.
He doesn't want to save Cardassians, but Kirk. To put it on a bigger example, like he has a great line, and it confronts his ideals and his beliefs in Star Trek 6, where the Klingon moon explodes, and Spock's like, "We gotta go save the Klingons. They're gonna die," and Kirk says, "Let them die."
That is my favorite scene in Star Trek.
Yeah.
It's my favorite scene in Star Trek because it flips everything on the head and it completely challenges this character.
Yeah.
Star Trek 6 is my favorite Star Trek movie.
and then Kirk spins the movie saving the Klingons.
Yeah.
So like again, I think you're exactly right. I think a lot of it is because of the hours that you can tell. You can push these characters. These characters have more distance. Whereas within Star Wars, we get to see these characters once a year, once every other year.
Less than 3 hours?
For 2 hours.
Yeah.
For 2 hours. Yeah.
100%. And sometimes I love the movie Solo, and I know maybe you didn't, but it suffers. It suffers because look at a character like Kira in 2 books, Most Wanted by Ray Carson and the Solo novelization by Mur Lafferty. Two women get to write that character of Kira, and it is an infinitely more interesting, wonderful, dynamic character. You learn a lot about a lot of people through Kira. In the movie, you don't get that chance.
That's good to hear. I was going to say that because she actually was one of the most intriguing characters, but we learned nothing about her.
Great casting choice
in Solo. Yeah.
But you hear Emilia Clarke. This isn't not getting into the Lord and Miller and the Ron Howard stuff, but she's one of the only ones to be pretty vocal about. My direction from Lord and Miller was, femme fatale. And she was like, "That's not a direction. That's not anything." Yeah. Ron Howard comes with her and sits down, so I get a little. I wish I had the opportunity. I wish there was a Solo 10-part miniseries that you could go into this character because Most Wanted, which is another young adult novel, they always release one for every big movie.
Isn't it funny that YA is the largest best-selling genre other than romance, and it, like romance novels, does have a certain stain on it when you're talking to certain people. YA, why YA?
But so far,
what's YA? Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings.
Yes. But also every book example either one of you have brought up because once they got rid of the expanded universe, I said I'm done with Star Wars books because I read so many. Look, I put so much damn time in the Use King Vong attacking the Star Wars universe, so that when they got rid of that universe, I was like, I'm done. Yeah. But I will say that it's interesting that both of you keep bringing up other Star Wars books, and again, that maybe this is a weakness. Again, the Star Trek doing better characters than Star Wars. These books have to make these characters better. Or these books do make the characters better than the movies, and I would say that's a fault of the franchise. Yeah,
it is something I have to admit as a Star Wars fan. No, there's our good friend Alicia Malone. Like she admits I'm not a franchise sci-fi Lord of the Rings Star Wars person, but like in Force Awakens, there's a moment where Hosnian Prime's destroyed by Starkiller Base, and you see the Chancellor there, and there's Corsella, Leia's assistant, and it's 2 seconds.
Who's a Doctor Who companion? She's played by Martha.
I forget.
I can't remember her name.
Something Sellers.
Yeah.
Gosh, I forget that. I apologize. Take my trivia crown away from me. She.
Gonna give the point to Ashley in this round? No.
Point to Ashley. She's on the screen for 2 seconds, right?
Yeah.
And then you start to learn more about this character, who she was, Corey Sella in Bloodline, and I was telling Alicia, like, this is a great character. She's like, yeah, but it was 2 seconds on the screen. I was like, God, you're right.
Yeah,
you're right. So you're right.
So I want to chime in because we haven't done what we think Star Wars does better than Star Trek. And I will say this. I think Star Wars is more accessible than Star Trek.
I would 100% agree to that. Part of that is the cultural reputation that both of them enjoy. I think the Kelvin-verse Star Trek movies do a good job.
Sure.
They're a great entry point because if you like those, if you've never seen Star Trek, there's a lot that you can go back and visit. But maybe it's because you don't need to know anything to go into Star Wars. Like they're building that world for you.
And I would make the argument, I almost think I think you can drop into any episode almost, with the exception of Last Jedi. I think Last Jedi you have to see Force Awakens because it happens seconds after.
You might be right.
All the rest of them, I think 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you can watch any of those in any order.
Well, judging by the fact that the franchise starts with episode 4.
Sure. But I think you could jump into Empire Strikes Back and figure it out if you'd never seen 4. I think you could do it.
that goes to Lucas making silent films. You
Yeah.
know? So the bad guy walks in and then the organ music plays. You know,
Yes.
and I think you're absolutely right.
I think that also goes to your point about the mythology. And I would definitely agree that like Star Wars mythology outstrips Star Trek.
Yeah.
And Trek has mythology, and different races have mythology, but it's also wider spread.
Well,
so you do get less
Well,
of it at the same time.
It's like we talked about with the Zeus in the Ulysses S. Grant. Like Star Trek is a universe built upon the realities and sort of the ideas of our world. So if you don't know the entire history, or at least what Star Trek has told you about the United Federation of Planets, if you hop into Picard, you're going to be a little lost. If you don't
and
know,
people are going to do it.
and people are going to do
Fools.
it, or you won't get any.
Professor X is in a Star Trek.
Yeah, what the hell's going on? Or you won't understand why
Someone's gonna say that, though.
why the Klingon stuff in the Klingon War that happens in the middle of Deep Space Nine makes any difference if you haven't seen Next Generation. It
Right,
makes
yeah.
a difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Ashley, you mentioned the hero's journey, right? So you in 1977, you sit down and watch that movie. You've seen it before. You just don't know.
Yes,
And so you immediately,
exactly.
oh yeah, I got it. And
What is the movie that Lucas is it something Fortress?
Well, Hidden Fortress.
That's right. Yeah.
Seven Samurai, and of course Joseph Campbell's books. But that's I think I don't ever want to fault Star Wars for that because that's what George wanted
and
to
I know.
do. Yeah, and I'm not saying you guys are, but
that's a big strength. I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But in Star Trek, it's like there's a lot of characters.
It's apples and oranges. It really is because it
is.
They
I
very
like-
much are apples and oranges.
I like fruit.
Yeah, and we all like fruit.
I like a lot of
I like
whole
apples
fruit.
and oranges. So, but it is that idea. It's like it's a little bit of and I guess right now we're going into the general discussion area of the podcast now because I think we've made both interesting points. I think we both opened our doors and again there is no winner, but it is very much an apples and oranges argument because I think if you're looking for big adventure and the mythology and killing the gods
And frankly, better fights.
and better fights.
On every level, space battles, hand in hand.
I know you can just say it better action.
Yeah.
This
Yeah,
is,
absolutely.
I will concede the entire point of action to Star Wars.
I think they're hilarious and I love them, but
Star Wars-
I hate
Star Trek fist
the
fights?
Star Trek two-handed blows.
Yeah.
Where they just like do the two-handed.
no.
I hate them.
The better one is, and this will hopefully illuminate Ken. You can go find this video. There is a compilation on YouTube of Star Trek hits from the Next Generation, and it's where they hit people with the open palm.
Hate that too.
Like
Yeah.
right in the chin.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. But there is like clip after clip after clip of them just like pow.
Yeah, I get it. They were trying to do like this science future thing.
Well, space karate.
But it's dumb.
Is that what it is?
Yes.
That's the actual reason?
Yes.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's also why they
yeah.
had pointed sideburns, because it's supposed to be like the style of the time. So
Okay.
whenever we see pointed sideburns, I call them Star Trek sideburns.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never
But
had those.
and I think if you're going for Star Trek, I think you're looking for I'm going to say classic sci-fi. I think you're looking for something that is an allegory to us, or something that is going to make you think.
You're going for the Hamlet idea of holding the mirror up to nature.
Well, yeah, I think I think Star Trek is you want to think about something. Star Wars is I want to feel something. You know, I think
That's great. I never really thought of it in those simple terms.
Yeah, I don't know, and that's not to say that either franchise doesn't make you do the opposite.
Oh yeah, no,
You
but
know?
I am generally a dumb person, so I'm going to go for Star Wars. no, but no, I've never thought of it in those plain terms. And it makes sense to me. Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Ken, how much Star Trek have you seen? Like, what have you watched?
Fair question. Quite a bit in terms of the movies. I love Star Trek 6, my favorite one. Who doesn't love Star Trek 4? Because I had been to
Voyage
that.
Home?
I've been to that aquarium.
It's
And I was
also-
like, I've been there. And I love First Contact.
That's my favorite movie.
So
too,
what is
yeah.
it? Is it 2, 4, 6, 8? Is that how you're supposed to alternate between the good ones?
It's supposed to be the even, but it's supposed to be
But I
the
like
even
Search for
numbers.
Spock.
But
Search for Spock is good. Yeah.
yeah, I like Search for Spock too. But the Abrams movies broke that because Abrams is I think 13.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
hell if I know.
the Abrams movies break that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I haven't seen after 8. I didn't see any of those other ones.
I think that's okay.
Yeah, I think
That's
you're
all
fine.
right. Is that
If
okay?
you've seen First Contact, you saw the good
They're
one.
mostly downhill from there.
Grew up seeing the first series in syndication a lot, and my dad was maybe even more of a fan of Star Trek than Star Wars. And then Next Generation came along. I always confuse it with New Generation from Robotech. Next Generation came along, and that was around the time I had become friends with that friend, this kid Steve, who went to school with, and so I was like, and my friend Joel, he's down here, he's a screenwriting teacher now. I was like, all right. I'll give it a try. And I love Next Generation.
Yeah.
I love Q. Q's fascinating to me. Q is a fascinating character.
He was a very Star Wars type character.
Might be.
Yeah. Because Ashley, as a matter of fact, I love Q as well.
Hate Q.
There's a
I hate
subsection
Q.
of Star Trek
John
fans
DeLancey,
that
wonderful
hate Q.
actor.
Yeah.
Hate Q.
So I think the reason there's a whole subsection of Star Trek fans that don't like Q, I think because he's not science fiction, he's kind of mystical.
He's got a little force.
No, that's exactly what I told
I just stumbled down this alley, and I've been. This is great. Really, so that might be it.
He's too magic for me. I don't want magic in Star Trek.
Yeah.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
You know, or if I do, we'll go back to Deep Space Nine again. There is a very heavy religion, a religious overtone there. Sisko is a prophet for an alien god.
Yeah.
But we also know that the gods are wormhole aliens. Like they are tangible and they are quantified for us. And there's a lot of arguments in that show about whether or not they're gods or are they human or are they beings? And
they're just aliens that we don't understand.
And is your faith tampered by knowing what they are and blah blah blah? But I don't want mysticism in my Star Trek.
But it's fair. It's so funny because it's what you're drawn to, right?
Absolutely.
Do you like the citrus of an orange or the crunch of an apple?
Look, as Thor said on a rooftop in New Mexico to Padme Amidala, magic is just a science that you don't understand yet.
I hate that one.
There's little moments in Star Wars, especially in Star Wars Rebels. There's this thing. If you, I don't want to assume you aren't or not familiar with it. World Between Worlds. Where it's this weird little thing where they pop into the Emperor's trying to get into it.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I love that sequence.
And Ahsoka's pulled out and saved and all this stuff. Great character.
By the way, I'm just going to throw it out there. Star Wars Rebels.
Yeah.
My favorite Star Wars thing.
It's got some great stuff. And there you great stuff. And I love that episode. I love World Between Worlds, but it opened up this time traveling question.
Yeah.
And I was like, never in my Star Wars do I want them to get in the DeLorean and fly back. Like, I do not want sci-fi in my fantasy. So
That's
totally
funny.
Rebels.
It's funny because I really love that.
Rebels. You're like,
Oh, okay.
Well, Rebels, and without getting too far into spoilers for Star Wars Rebels, which we won't do, Ezra has this ability in the final episode that is unlike anything we've ever seen a Jedi do, which I kind of felt the same way about, where I was like, oh, if Jedis can do this.
But it's funny because I feel like with Ezra, they do go out of their way to see that he is different and powerful. Like, think about the episode with the space whales.
Yeah.
Which at first I thought was kind of dumb, and I've warmed up to over the years.
Space Whales is my for those who listen to my shows is my big infamous stumbling block. And when people like Dave Filoni should take over every creative decision in Star Wars, I was like, well, Space Whales. Whales. But like you
love Space Whales in Star Trek 4 though.
I do love them.
They go to space.
I do love Space Whales. I didn't even
George and Gracie.
No. But I grew to them because of the way that ended and Ezra's connection to what was going on. Yeah. So that's interesting.
Star Wars Rebels is great. Go watch it.
It is really good. I mean, there you go. A series that starts completely aimed at the kids, and I'm watching on Disney XD.
Yes.
Next thing you know, I'm like, this is deep stuff.
All right, I'll put you on the spot here again, Ken.
Oh yeah.
What would you say to somebody? Let's say you meet somebody randomly at one of the comedy shows you do, or the Schmodown, or wherever you're at. You're just wandering around a mall somewhere.
The Northridge Mall. That's fair.
The Northridge Mall. Yes. Your old stomping ground.
17 years there.
Somebody comes up to you and says, Ken, I'm thinking about watching this Star Trek thing.
Okay.
Do you think I should? What do you say to that person?
I would say absolutely.
Okay.
I would say you should start with, depending on my mood, Wrath of Khan, or just go to Abrams first and see if you like, because there's a bunch of things there. You might set you up for failure if you go back to see like the first Star Wars movie from Star Trek movie from 79.
Yep.
But Khan, though, Wrath of Khan, I think that I love Star Trek 6, but Wrath of Khan might be the better one. Maybe I would defer to you guys' knowledge.
I think I would say, as the Star Trek fan, I would say objectively, I think you have to give it to Wrath of Khan.
Sure.
Because we recently got to see it on the rooftop of the Malta Bomb, which is amazing. And watching it there,
it feels modern.
Right.
And I don't think there's a single scene you can cut from that film without the whole movie
cut
failing.
David from that. I don't like David.
No, you can't. You can't cut David.
All right, well, you guys
because if you lose David, you lose the let them die.
Star
Trek 6.
It's fine. I don't need any more Klingons.
So I might say start there. I don't know but it's interesting that I don't know if I'd start them at the TV show, only because I don't know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know, episode such and such. I'd be like Shatner in that SNL sketch. I don't know. But the reason I'd say Abrams, jokes aside, and I know those movies maybe not. I don't know if it sits well with every Star Trek.
I like them. I like them. A lot of fans don't. I like them.
But that one, it is because it's accessible. It is accessible, and you get all the things that I think people would love in Star Trek, but you get kind of a big budget. I'm not even going to say Star Wars like, but you get that big feel.
I'm going to throw this, and I've said this several times. I think Star Trek 2009 by J.J. Abrams is J.J. Abrams' best film. I think it's better than Force Awakens. I don't think he's ever topped it than 2009. I just feel because...
I think it's the difference between somebody who is making bold creative choices because they have something they're sort of interested in and they're more interested in being a director versus... somebody who's being, I think, a little more precious with a franchise that they love.
Yeah, I think so too.
If I could lobby a criticism.
I think that's a fair point. I think that's the reason why Star Trek 2009 stands out is because, he wasn't precious. He broke a lot of things, and because of that, he made them better.
Yeah.
He made them better.
Or worse.
Or worse sometimes. The triple blood.
I mean, do we need Uhura and Spock together? No.
No.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
But you know what I need? More Carl Urban as Bones.
That's right.
Hey, super friends, I have to interrupt this content real quick to pay the bills so we can keep this podcast free for you because we got to talk about some things that are not smart. You want to know what's not smart? Tugging on Superman's cape. You want to know what's not smart? Making fun of Martha in front of Batman. But you know what is smart? Going to ZipRecruiter.com/geekhistory to hire the right person. Now, ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them for you. Just like Batman hunting down the Joker. He's going to hunt it down for you. Its powerful matching technology scans thousands of resumes, identifies people with the right skills, education, and experience for your job, and actively invites them to apply so you can get qualified candidates fast. Now imagine if Batman had ZipRecruiter. If Batman had ZipRecruiter, I don't think we would have ran into a Jason Todd situation with Robin, if you know what I'm saying. That's why ZipRecruiter is rated #1 by employers and Justice Leagues in the U.S. Yes, I said Justice Leagues. Now this rating comes from hiring sites such as Trustpilot with over 1,000 reviews. And right now, our listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/geekhistory. That's ZipRecruiter.com/geekhistory. Gonna say it one more time for you, just in case Batman is listening or all the robots out there. I want you to hear this. ZipRecruiter.com/geekhistory. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And now back to the show.
So let's go here. Ken, has this conversation made you maybe want to check out some Star Trek?
It's made me realize a little bit more why I was drawn to Star Wars over Star Trek. As far as wanting more Star Trek, I don't know if I'd ever say I'd sit down and watch it all, but I never paid too much attention to Deep Space Nine. I think I even had a high school friend who was on Deep Space Nine, or maybe he was on Voyager.
Say what now?
Ichib, my friend Manu.
Oh, Voyager.
Oh, you know Ichib?
Voyager.
Voyager.
I went to high school with Manu.
He's one of the Borglings.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. He still does a lot of Star Trek fan films.
He does, yeah. But I don't know why. So Deep Space Nine, the fact that you guys have a ton of figures.
Oh, we have the we have the complete set of Deep Space Nine. That's the first wave of Deep Space Nine action figures in our recording studio right now.
It's so funny. I'm looking at them. I would probably, if you were to just show me, this is really interesting. If you were just to show me pictures and take the names away of every Star Trek show or Next Generation I watched, I think I'd be able to name more of these. Like Lieutenant Dax, I remember. Him, Odo, I remember because he was in Benson.
Rene Auberjonois.
Yeah.
He was in the original MASH.
Yeah.
The
Yes.
movie.
Yes.
Yeah, he's Father McKay.
That's right.
So that's interesting to me.
And a man called Hawk, Cisco.
Cisco, Quark, definitely. Colm Meaney as O'Brien.
And everyone, you don't remember everyone's favorite Morn?
Definitely don't remember Morn.
Do you know I'm gonna blow your mind right now. Do you know the joke of Morn?
Was he in Jabba's palace?
He probably was. But it's Norm backwards because it's a joke to
It's
Cheers.
Cheers?
Because he's the guy. He's in he's in almost every episode of Deep Space Nine.
And he never speaks.
He never speaks a line, but he's always sitting at the bar.
That's awesome.
It truly must have been the best featured extra gig of all time.
That's it. Yeah. So to hear it,
And I'm sorry we turned this podcast into like go watch Deep Space Nine, but Deep Space Nine, I'm sorry, is my favorite.
But I love hearing passions, and if you're both aligned in that, I'm assuming that is that actually what is your go-to? Have to take it to a desert island Star Trek.
Ooh, Deep Space Nine. If I could only have one episode, I would take Far Beyond the Stars.
Okay.
Yeah, I would take the
Which
whole.
is, like,
I would take
specifically-
Deep Space Nine because you could.
Yeah, easy.
It's
also, there's a lot of it. There's 7 seasons.
It's also so
like 25.
23 episodes. It's so deep.
Old television.
It's so deep with character depth as well that it's very rewatchable. I'll be honest with you, I've rewatched it 3 times.
So
entirety.
And I've never known the credited with the first like kind of serialized of the modern age of TV. So to hear 2 experts that you both are, and the passion and knowledge you have, and to both have you be drawn to that, that's something I've never really heard.
Yeah.
I don't talk Star Trek a lot, but that's interesting.
I will say it has a pretty good pilot. So if you have nothing else to do,
has a rough first season.
Right.
And but second season they figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First season they're like, we're just making TNG, and then after that they realize they're not.
Yeah.
Well, also, there used to be a time in entertainment where you could have a rough pilot or first season and not be canceled immediately.
That's right. Now you can't do that. I will also,
especially if you're a sci-fi show.
as a person who loves the wars in the stars, Deep Space Nine is the show that's all about a space war.
Yeah,
Perfect.
that's true.
And it's basically 4 seasons of a space war.
I like them fighting.
Yeah. There's a lot of fighting.
Jason, I want to ask you because Ken specifically and I, to a lesser degree, have lobbed around a lot of new canon books that we enjoy. Has that inspired you to pick up any of them or consider that?
I don't know. I still have a very sore spot. Again, because
Ken just told you there was an Obi-Wan Qui-Gon book coming out.
Yeah, Claudia Gray.
You know, I'll tell you this.
That'd be a great
Here's
way.
how old school I was.
Yeah.
I read, they're probably not in continuity anymore. I read the Scholastic
Those are
Jedi Apprentice
on
books.
our recommended reading from a previous Star Wars
me, I
episode.
think,
Yeah,
where Obi-Wan gets picked up by Qui-Gon and stuff like that. I love those books.
Doesn't count. Forget it all.
In my universe, Chewbacca died a long time ago.
Squished by a moon?
Yep.
Get out of here.
Squished by a
That's the
moon.
reason I hate Legends.
And Han Solo's kid is named Jason.
Jason.
With a
Jada.
I
C.
love Jason and Jaina.
Yeah.
I can't believe actually it blew me away when we were actually walking through a Target recently about a couple months back, and we saw a Jaina action figure, and I was like, "What?"
I know. I won't buy it until they make Jason as well.
6-inch Black Series. She was voted in. They occasionally do fan
amazing.
votes.
She looks great too.
Yeah, and she's got a purple lightsaber
I
too.
will
right?
say,
Yeah.
she does. She does. I actually, because I was
God
so
bless the fan votes because that's how I got all my favorite characters on the Black Series.
Yeah, I will say I'm a little like I like the idea of Jason and Jaina a little bit better than Ben Solo.
You like the twins?
I do. I like. I like
mean,
the twins.
Just to respect everybody's preference in headcanon, just because Kylo Ren exists doesn't mean Jason and Jaina
Oh
don't exist.
no! But I will say that it's one of those things where I remember when George was making the prequels in Episode 1, he did not want to call the city planet Coruscant.
Yeah.
But apparently, a bunch of his producers were like, "This has been in books since like '85. You have to use Coruscant."
Yeah, it's the Timothy Zahn series, Heir of the Empire. I read those, and I do like those. And Coruscant.
They're great.
And Luke has hot chocolate for the first time. Then I read the Jedi Academy, and that was the last ever out of the Star Wars books. But I got to the end of it. Kevin J. Anderson wrote the Jedi Academy, and I went, "This is not Star Wars to me."
Yeah,
and I never read the rest of them.
They went off the rails a little bit, but I don't know. I'm intrigued.
Star Trek books do the same.
Yeah,
Do they?
Star Trek books don't even.
They're awful.
Don't even bother.
They've gotten better recently.
There are some good ones. There are some bad ones. Just like everything, but. The Leia book you guys kept talking about is the one that sounds the most intriguing to me. What's it called again? Bloodline?
Princess Leia.
No.
Bloodlines is different by the same author.
Leia
is
Princess
Bloodlines
Volda. So here's the thing, and people ask a lot, "Hey, where should I would start with Lost Stars, which is
I read that last Christmas.
Yes.
You told me that.
Yeah, Ciena Ray and Thane Kyrell, and it is kind of a Romeo and Juliet in space, but it takes you all through the events of the original trilogy from their points of view and their vault.
Oh, is this the one I think I've heard about where it's like one person is a rebel, one person is an Imperial?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Leia
appears in that book.
Yeah, she cameos in it.
Yeah. And then Bloodlines comes out. And Bloodlines by Claudia Gray it's 6 years before The Force Awakens. So it is Leia in a centrist and populist are the two kind of governments. And Leia's in an election. It's revealed that she is the daughter of Vader. No one knew that. We knew that.
And that's the
No
reason
one
why she gets kicked out of the Senate, right?
And they consider her a warmonger. They consider her like, you're talking about this first order. What are you talking about? You're the daughter of Vader. And there's just something at the end of the book that all ties into Leia, Princess of Alderaan. So I suggest doing that.
The arc of, I think that's a great story arc. The idea that this new Republic would find out that she's the daughter of Vader, that would ostracize the crap out of somebody.
Absolutely, yeah. Even if you weren't raised by that. I also think Bail Organa is a criminally underrated character for his impact on the Star Wars universe.
Now, is there any scenes dealing with the idea that there were all these rebels that saw Leia and Luke just make out in Hoth?
No.
Nope.
No,
Nothing?
because it was a medical droid. It was Han.
There's nobody in that room.
No, I assume that they made out more than just that scene. I mean, it was cold.
Oh, don't.
It's
no,
cold and
no,
hot.
No,
And,
no. Stop right now.
I will say, I am reading the Star Wars comic books, and they are killing it.
They're great.
Both Darth Vader books are great. The one by Karen Gillan and the one by Charles Soule.
I got here a little early, and
Yeah.
when I texted you, I was out in my car reading issue 22.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. I'm excited about the new storyline at the time of this recording, Vader's Castle.
Yeah.
The Mark Waid Leia series, I'm still mad it wasn't written by a lady, but it's great series.
And then the Star Wars series has gotten better. I went around with the place when it was with Jason Aaron, but with Kieran Gillen, because it has been getting better and better.
Because it's issue 55, so that's been around a lot. But there was one point. It's so funny though. Talk about Q and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes Star Wars gets too fantasy for me, and there is a line in that Marvel comic, the Citadel or wherever it was, the Screaming Citadel. And there's some zombie possession and all this kind of stuff. That Star Wars, it's really hard. I feel bad for creators who create Star Wars, because that doesn't feel like Star Wars is a phrase we hear a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't know to this day what it means other than when I see it.
Well, you also have to think about, as well, anybody writing these books, anybody writing these comic books, especially for Star Wars, even Star Trek, you have to do this thing where you have to fit in between episodes or movies
and preserve canon, but still tell an interesting, compelling story where people change and grow, and which is my argument. One of my criticisms of the Ahsoka Tano book, which I enjoyed, but
it's because it's the idea of how much can
just give me more Dr. Aphra.
How much can you change? Oh God, how much can you change that character when you can't change that character?
Yeah, and I think that's going to like Aphra, because we have no previous record of her, so we can go to a lot of crazy
They would
places.
be nuts if they didn't put her in a movie soon.
Yeah, but you know what? We don't have Ahsoka in a movie, so
We don't have
that one too.
I think that because the animation. I think this
they painted
Mandalorian.
lots of girls blue.
It's true. No, it's true. And Rosario Dawson wanted to play her. I think this Mandalorian series
I'm excited for that.
Will be able to go into different areas. There's a lot of characters that are so great. Ray Sloan's one of them. Everyone's in the books that should step out from the page and into the screen.
And I think that's a great place to end our discussion, because just to let you know, we're going to pick Ken's brain a little bit more over at our Patreon at patreon.com/Jawiin. We're going to talk with Ken about ideas for Star Wars movies and TV shows, like what are some Star Wars stories, because Ken is an expert and I want to pick his brain, and you heard him drop all this book knowledge, so that's just amazing stuff. So I'm really excited about this. I hope you guys learned something about Star Trek. I hope you learned something about Star Wars. Ken, thank you so much for joining us. You do so many podcasts. You have a Patreon as well. Please tell us where they can find it. I am a supporter of Ken on Patreon, so please pimp that.
And I'm a supporter of both of you, so on Patreon. You can just follow me at Ken Napzok, Napzok, across all social media platforms. That includes YouTube, where I'm late to the game but doing weird motivation videos on my bath ropes that are bad motivations intentionally, that kind of stuff. And then, I talk Star Wars over at Force Center Pod. You can follow us. That's with Joseph Scrimshaw and Jennifer Landa, and we do 4 new shows a week, and it's a lot of Star Wars, but there's a lot to talk about.
Wow.
So
you record that every day?
We recorded Mondays.
Okay.
Yeah, my Monday mornings are a bunch of
Pretty packed
Star Wars.
All right, cool.
And that's generally it. But a lot of fun, and this was great, because this is a timeless geek dork nerd battle, right?
Yes.
That it shouldn't be. We should all get along.
It might be fun. I think it might be fun, actually, to go a sequel, if we will, because both these franchises do lots of sequels to this conversation, might be to pick what we think is. You pick what you think is the best Star Wars movie. We pick what is the best Star Trek film, and we compare, contrast, debate.
Interesting.
You know, that would be, I think, a fascinating discussion. So if you want to hear that, please tweet Ken. You just heard tweet at GHL Podcast. Tweet me at Jawiin, Jawiin. Tweet Ashley at Ashley V. Robinson. Tell us if you want this episode. Thank you so much for subscribing to this podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. It's on iTunes, it's on Spotify. It's basically everywhere you can listen to podcasts, guys. It's everywhere out there. Support the Patreon if you want to hear more Ken, patreon.com/Jawiin. And Ashley, if they like this versus discussion, where can they suggest future ideas?
They can suggest future topics, or if you're a patron, you also heard our Lord of the Rings versus Harry Potter discussion with Rachel Cushing. You can check out more of these nerd debates or recommend them to us at geekhistorylesson.com, facebook.com/geekhistorylesson, or on Twitter at GHL Podcast.
Ken, thank you so much for joining us again. It was a pleasure. I'm so glad that we did not have to kill you for the greater good, just like Anakin did with Mace Windu. I have been Jason Jabba the Hutt Inman.
I've been Ashley Victoria Robinson.
And class is dismissed.